The second story also has to do with the West Bank, and it has to do with a heroine rather than a hero on this occasion. And this is Amira Haas, who is a very famous Israeli journalist, writes for the main daily paper, is entirely independent in her positions, and has spent long time periods living in Gaza and living on the West Bank, which is illegal for somebody holding Israeli citizenship. So she's in constant kind of clash with the authorities. So this is a story that was told to me. It's not an official story. It was a story that was told to me by a friend. She was visiting the wife of a Palestinian political prisoner who's in prison in Israel, and the wife lives on the West Bank, and she was visiting her. And at the same time, the woman's mother was visiting her. The woman's mother comes from Gaza. If you know the geography of Israel, you know that these are disconnected, and there's no passage between the West Bank and Gaza. It's part of the kind of closure of Gaza, which came to great prominence on Monday with the flotilla of aid worker ships. And the woman's mother had broken her leg while she was in visiting her daughter. She was quite elderly, and there was a problem about how she would get back to Gaza. There's no public transportation and so on. And so Amira Haas said that she has press credentials on her card, and she can get through, and she'll take the woman. She'll drive her back to Gaza. But the woman was very nervous because this was an Israeli and a stranger, and she was going into enemy territory, and so she was understandably nervous. And so Amira Haas said, well, I have a sort of phone, a car phone. I'll keep it open so you can talk to your daughter throughout the journey. And so as long as they were in the West Bank, things were familiar and not so threatening. But as soon as they crossed the border into Israel, things got, far more complicated. And so in order to calm this woman down, Amira Haas began to produce a kind of ghost geography of Palestine. Every destroyed village and every destroyed town and every destroyed route, which she had within her. And she could somehow navigate this journey through this kind of ghost geography that she could somehow recall and produce for this woman. And this was another one of those moments when it became very clear that cartography, the ability to navigate, the ability to locate, the ability to name, the ability to place, were being sort of gone beyond. They were being transcended by something else, by a kind of practice that comes into being that doesn't work with either the representation or the counter-representation, but sort of produces a kind of third element. Like the structure of language that relies on negative differentiation, this is not that, that is not this, so does cartography rely on principles of division and containment. Places and spaces are delineated and contained, named and differentiated from one another in attempts to entrench meaning and cohesion through partition. In this mode of thinking, the boundary is a line of delineation whose capacity is largely for holding inside of it that which has a tendency or a desire to leach outside of it and co-join with whatever it feels an affinity for: people, landscapes, textures, languages. And I think that the two stories that I've told you have to do with precisely that kind of unwillingness to accept the disciplining properties of geography and to kind of allow oneself to leak back into, I think in Jadisach's case, logic, which is something that a kind of evil chaos undoes. And in the case of Amira Haas and the kind of ghost geography of Palestine, the insistence that it's there, that it exists, that it might not be what is signed, across the landscape, but it is there. The third story comes from Toni Morrison. They straightened out the Mississippi River in places to make room for houses and livable acreage. Occasionally, the river floods these places. Floods is the word they use, but in fact, the river is not flooding. It is remembering, remembering where it used to be. All water has a perfect memory and is forever trying to get to where it was. Writers are like that, remembering where we were, what valley we ran through, what the banks were like, the light that was there, and the route back to our original place. It's emotional memory, what the nerves and the skin remember, as well as how it appeared. And a rush of the imagination is our flooding. Now, in the context of this writing, I would want to ensure a distance from some fantasy of harmoniousness in which those who transcend the boundaries of nationalist and identitarian strictures have liberated themselves into some stratosphere of possible rapprochement. As Bruce Robbins says, quote, understood as a fundamental devotion to the interests of humanity as a whole, cosmopolitanism has often seemed to claim universality by virtue of its independence, its detachment from the bond, commitments, and affiliations that constrain ordinary nation-bound lives. If subjects are not end of quote. If subjects are not liberated out of boundaries by these universalist aspirations, can these same somehow implode through subjects' different inhabitation of them? So what I'm trying to argue is, not geographical mastery, not cartographic control, but in a sense a Deleuzian inhabitation of certain kinds of conditions, which I think through our inhabitation we can somehow implode. We can somehow kind of destabilize the ground on which they operate. Therefore, I'd like to focus on the uneasy life of boundaries as they fail to do what they have been set up to do: police the arbitrary structures of division and containment. To paraphrase Jacques Derrida in The Eyes of the University, boundaries, whether narrow or expanded, do nothing more than set out the limits of the possible. How then can we put forward an engaged discussion of place or location that is not held capture by the logics of division and containment, that does not again and again do the work of setting up conflict and reconciliation in terms of a binary of engaged protagonists, even when these protagonists are entirely committed to transcending their conditions and location? They are still doing so from the opening shot of being situated subjects. Perhaps one of the ways of doing this is by an understanding that geography is not location, but a situated knowledge. Who we are, where we are, what we know, what our heritages and allegiances are, has always been linked to geography, not as a set of locating vectors, but rather to yoke places to traditions and trajectories of knowledge. Each place knows differently, and if they are not to be related to one another in dated and irrelevant notions of knowledge from the center versus knowledge from the periphery, then how might they produce circular movements of knowledge which defies geographical subjugation? The concept of exhausted geographies that I'm trying to discuss here is a concept that is trying to work against the grain of both the boundaries of the possible and of location as the site of identity and knowledge navigation.